Hi, my name is Laura Newson, and I am presenting over C.S. Lewis. And he was born in November 29th, 1898, to Albert and Florence Lewis as Clive Staples Lewis, and then later was kind of known for Jack. And he had an older brother named Warren, and they lived in Belfast, Ireland. Now it's known as United Kingdom. And C.S. Lewis was just always surrounded by books and always was reading and just found his passion for that. And he knew that he wanted to become a writer at about 11 or 12 years old, but it didn't come natural to him. He knew that he needed to continue his education. And in their house that his father had designed, ended up kind of being poorly designed, but had cupboard-like doors that led to nothing. And Warren and C.S. Lewis kind of made that their hiding place, known as the Little End Room. And there, C.S. Lewis created his fantasy land known as Animal Land, and that was animals with human-like characteristics, which was his inspiration for his novels later on in his life. And so in 1903, his grandfather had moved in and brought his ancient books, and the two of them created a bond by the books and listening to his grandfather's folk tales. And in 1908, his mother actually got sick and was bedridden, and that kind of forced the grandfather to move out. And 2 weeks later, he had a stroke and passed away. And in August of that same year, his mother ended up passing away from the cancer. And so that the life that he once knew was no more. His father became a raging alcoholic, and that made Warren decide that he was going to go off to boarding school, and C.S. Lewis was left becoming lonely and just kind of escaped in his fantasy land, and realized that it wasn't going to get any better at home, so he moved on to the boarding school where Warren was at, but that was also not any better. The headmaster was very cruel and abusive to the children, and later ended up being the school was shut down. And so C.S. Lewis had to move on to another school, and Albert's friend T. Kirkpatrick decided to tutor C.S. Lewis, who that ended up being one of his most influential persons in his early life, because it just kind of, he helped ingrain discipline and methodology into him that he had lacked, and that made him prepared to move on to college. He went to Oxford University and later War, and with one of his comrades there, they made a promise that if one had passed away in the line of duty, that it would take care of the widow that was left behind. And so that happened. His friend had died, and he kept his promise. And when he got back to Belfast, he moved in with Jan Moore, and they had created a strong companionship. There was a big age gap between them, but the relationship made C.S. Lewis very happy, and they were together for about 30 years until she had passed away. And C.S. Lewis became a professor at Magdalen University, and he was there for about 30 years as well. And in 1956, he had met his wife, Joy. Here's a picture. And they were together until 1960, when she had passed away. And so through this, C.S. Lewis developed his passion for writing, and once it kind of clicked with him, he produced his works in less than a year, and for most of the novels. And and he ended up passing away in 1963. So I'm going to read a little bit out of his Chronicles of Narnia, The Horse and His Boy. And this book has very little illustrations, but when they have some, they're just kind of black and white sketch. So, chapter 1, How Shasta Set Out on His Travels. This is a story of an adventure that happened in Narnia and Calormen and the lands between. In the Golden Age, when Peter was High King in Narnia, and his brother and his 2 sisters were king and queens under him. In those days, far south in Calormen, on a little creek of the sea, there lived a poor fisherman called Arshish, and with him there lived a boy who called him father. The boy's name was Shasta. On most days, Arshish went out in his boat to fish in the morning, and in the afternoon he harnessed his donkey in a cart and loaded the cart with fish and went a mile or so southward to the village to sell it. If it had sold well, he would come home in a moderately good temper and say nothing to Shasta. But if it had sold badly, he would find fault with him and perhaps beat him. There was always something to find fault with, for Shasta had plenty of work to do, mending and washing the nets, cooking the supper, and cleaning the cottage in which they both lived. Shasta was not at all interested in anything that lay south of his home, because he had once or twice been to the village with Arshish, and he knew that there was nothing very interesting there. In the village, he only met other men who were just like his father, men with long, dirty robes and wooden shoes turned up at the toe, and turbans on their heads and beards, talking to one another very slowly about things that sounded dull. But he was very interested in everything that lay to the north, because no one ever went that way, and he was never allowed to go there himself. When he was sitting out of the doors, mending the nets, and all alone, he would often look eagerly to the north. One could see nothing but a grassy slope running up to a level ridge, and beyond that the sky, with perhaps a few birds in it. Sometimes, if Arshish was there, Shasta would say, "Oh, my father, what is there beyond that hill?" And then, if the fisherman was in a bad temper, he would box Shasta's ears and tell him to attend to his work. Or, if he was in a peaceful mood, he would say, "Oh, my son, do not allow your mind to be distracted by idle questions. For one of the poets has said, 'Application to business is the root of prosperity.' But those who ask questions that do not concern them are steering the ship of folly toward the rock of intelligence." Shasta thought that beyond the hill there must be some delightful secret which his father wished to hide from him. In reality, however, the fisherman talked like this because he didn't know what lay to the north. Neither did he care. He had a very practical mind. One day there came from the south a stranger who was unlike any man that Shasta had seen before. He rode upon a strong, dappled horse with flowing mane and tail, and his stirrups and bridle were inlaid with silver. The spike of a helmet projected from the middle of his silken turban, and he wore a shirt of chain mail. By his side hung a curving scimitar, a round shield studded with bosses of brass hung at his back, and his right hand grasped a lance. His face was dark, but this did not surprise Shasta, because all of the people, colormen, are like that. What did surprise him was the man's beard, which was dyed crimson, and curled and gleaming with scented oil. But Arshish knew by the gold on the stranger's bare arm that he was a Tarkane, or great lord, and he bowed, kneeling before him, till his beard touched the earth, and made signs to Shasta to kneel also. So I'm going to end there. The interactive activity that I did was providing a wardrobe, and they are going to create their own fantasy scene behind the doors. So thank you.